Good morning, everybody. Christine Barconi here in the NBC4i Streaming Center. Thank you so much for being with us today for this championship Saturday. The Buckeyes are playing, obviously. All right, I'm done being obnoxious. Spotify paused. Joining me right now is NBC4 Sports Director Jared Smalley, as well as our digital sports reporter, Justin Holbrook. Good morning, guys. It's an exciting day.
Hi.
Morning.
Hi. How is everybody? Game starts in about a half an hour. I'm excited. In Indianapolis. We are not there this year, unfortunately, but it's going to be a great day, I think.
You know what, Christine? In this year of our Lord 2020, any day that we wake up with a pulse and a positive frame of mind is a heck of a day. And despite the horrific news that we broke a little earlier about the Ohio State roster today, there is still plenty of reason, maybe horrific's too strong a word, a setback, needless to say. There's still plenty of reason for optimism for Ohio State fans going into the biggest game of the year.
Positive mindset, but a negative test. That's what we need this year.
Hey, nice one.
I'm out.
I guess we can just start with that. I mean, if you haven't seen what we have up on NBC4i.com right now, you'll have the background of what we're talking about with the roster. So, look, it's not devastating news. We knew there were going to be some COVID cases. We did not have specific names. The one that literally the entire internet knew about as of Thursday was Chris Olave, and so we were confident that that was going to be one of them. We were also confident that Justin Fields was not going to be one of them. I had not heard that from anybody. Justin's playing today. Everything's fine there in that regard. So when you think a couple weeks ago to Michigan State game, right? They had a depleted offensive line. They missed 3 starters on the offensive line. They don't have a situation like that today against Northwestern. And matter of fact, they're really in good shape in terms of starters. Where they're going to struggle a little bit is with depth. The freshman receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So you have both he and Olave out, which means you're going to see a lot more of Jamison Williams, and you're going to see a lot more of probably Julian Fleming, the other true freshman receiver. #1 recruit in America as a receiver last year. He hasn't really lived up to a lot of what a lot of people build him to be. Mm-hmm. This is going to be an opportunity for him to have a more prominent role in the game plan. Defensively and special teams wise, they're a little bit more concerned. Drew Chrisman, the punter, is not available. He wrote on Twitter a little bit ago that he, in fact, did test positive for COVID-19. And I think he was expressing in that message that he has been experiencing symptoms.
Oh, man.
So he will not be in the game. And then I believe it's going to be Zach Hoover, who is a 2-time All-Stater in high school. I remember that. I think he'll be the punter for today's game. And then you would have some defensive concerns. Baron Browning at linebacker not playing is a concern. He's been outstanding. But they do have great depth at linebacker. Justin Hilliard gets an opportunity to play a little bit more today as a senior. Guy's played a lot of football. And then the biggest concern, Justin, we just found out that it was the game time decision in the plan today was for Marcus Hooker at safety. He will not play. He did not even warm up today. That means that you're down to probably Ronnie Hickman and a couple of freshmen at safety, unless they move Josh Proctor back and they adjust for the nickel, which is possible. But
Marcus Williamson as well in there.
That, Justin, where do you see the biggest problem being?
Yeah, I think it's got to be the secondary, even though it might bode well for Ohio State that is the biggest problem. Like you said, Josh Proctor is going to be there, so not having Marcus Hooker, obviously a concern. But I think when you talk about Northwestern, you're talking about a team that doesn't really pass the ball. They've run the ball over 300 times this year, and they only have like 212 passes. So they're towards the bottom of the Big Ten and the country in just pass attempts. And when they do decide to pass, they're not really successful at it in general. They're second to last in the Big Ten. They're just known for running the football. They're a very one-dimensional team. They like to run the clock down on people. So if you had to be out in a position, wide receiver is pretty good for Ohio State because they're very, very talented and they have a huge depth, like you said. They're going to have a lot of guys step up there, so I wouldn't worry about that. And the secondary, I wouldn't worry about it either because Northwestern doesn't really throw the football all that much.
Yeah, I think, Christine, there's going to be some issues there long-term, potentially. because, the Big Ten has a 21-day rule for anyone who tests positive. What will be important to know, Ohio State did not play last week, so we don't know out of all those players who tested positive this past week or 2 weeks ago. And that matters because if Ohio State wins today and they're playing in the college football playoff, those semifinals are January 1st, which means, quickie math, if there's a 21-day recovery period for players in the Big Ten, conference rule, not national rule, conference Big Ten rule, that means those players are not eligible if they tested positive this past week.
Do you think that's something that could be changed? Because obviously we saw them change the Big Ten championship rules. Do you think that's something they look at the CDC guidelines and say, the CDC has slid back their quarantining from 7 to 10 days, so they decide, all right, we'll do 14 days instead?
I mean, and that's the point I was getting ready to make, is just that the Big Ten has changed all their other rules. But I mean, there's I think that was essentially a rule made to get through the season, to get through the Big Ten season. And so it will be curious to see if they try to come up with a commonality among all of the schools playing in the college football playoff, which is a good problem to have if you get there, about how you're going to move forward with COVID protocols. You would like there to be some similarity between all the teams that are playing in it, and frankly, all the teams playing in bowl games. You would like there to be an even playing field in terms of COVID-19. We were just talking about this, and I wrote it on Twitter a second ago, and it's just important to note here. I don't care if you're rooting for Ohio State or Northwestern, you love the Buckeyes, you hate the Buckeyes, whatever. Big picture view here. The most impressive stat in college football this year is the fact that Northwestern, including today, 0 positive COVID-19 cases all season.
Jared, I'm looking at that tweet right now, and it's really going off. A lot of people agree with you. You tweeted it just a few minutes ago, and you're already getting hundreds of impressions on it. So definitely a lot of people agree with. Another thing, you retweeted Chris Olave, kind of just not too much information, but really tweeting a sad face that he's not playing emoji there, kind of communicating with fans that he's pretty upset that he's not going to get to play. Also talking long picture in the playoff goal down the line, with Ohio State having the least amount of games of anybody in the playoff picture, what is today going to have to look like to impress the committee to get them in a top 4 spot? Obviously, they've been in a top 4 spot of all of the pre-season polls that don't matter. Are they going to have to blow them out? Are they going to have to shut them out? What is it going to have to look like to really impress them to keep them in the top 4 when you have a lot more teams with a lot better records?
I think it's just a win. I think that's all they need to do today to get into the playoff. Yeah, because if you look at it, say, okay, Florida beats Alabama, and then you have Clemson beat Notre Dame, you might have a little bit of an issue of who to pick. But from a committee standpoint, from a college football playoff standpoint, you really can't pick 2 SEC teams and 2 ACC teams and leave Ohio State out, an undefeated Ohio State at that. And if you do, then we might be on the precipice of a playoff that's bigger than 4 teams. So for Ohio State, I think it's simple as win and you're in. Jared?
I think it's interesting. I think as we've learned in the college football playoff era, there are a couple of commonalities between the years that we've seen so far. And the first one being the developments of the last impression Saturday do matter in terms of the playoff committee, because they are human beings reacting to what they have seen, and they're having an emotional reaction to whether a team looked great or a team didn't look so great in the final chance they got to see them. So I think it isn't I don't think it's a guarantee if Ohio State wins the Big Ten title game minus 20 some players by 1 point. I don't think they get any credit for that. Here's another thing to take into consideration. Chris Olave isn't available today. Ohio State doesn't look very good throwing the ball. 21-day rule. He's not available for the New Year's Day game. Does the playoff committee factor that in to their decision making? Because they know that they're not getting, under the Big Ten rule as they know it on the day that they're picking the teams, they're not available. I mean, I think that is going to be a fascinating part of the discussion that we can't answer here. But I do wonder if they will take that into account in the committee room.
That would be so interesting to me. I obviously they're all human and they have different, biases and stuff like that. But in my opinion, that just wouldn't be fair to factor in one person. Obviously he's the best, arguably the best receiver, in the Big Ten, but I don't know. I just don't think the health of one person with under a protocol that could very well change. The Big Ten has bent before. I don't know. I just do not think that would be fair to Ohio State if a decision really weighed on the health of Chris Olave.
Speaking of one player, they might be.
All this.
Sorry, go ahead, Jared.
When you consider the college football playoff, one of the things that it has never been designed to do is be fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair to everybody. Cincinnati today is undefeated. They haven't played in nearly a month, but they're undefeated. They're going into the conference championship game tonight. They play Tulsa. They could finish 9-0 in their season, be a conference champion, and be well outside looking in terms of making the Final Four because they're not in a Power 5 conference. The most fascinating moves of the most recent poll last week were Florida losing as a 23-point favorite at home to LSU and moving down one spot in the CFP rankings, which is phenomenal. Georgia, as a 2-loss team, is still ranked ahead of Indiana, comfortably ahead of them. Indiana, 1 loss at 11 or outside the top 10. It is fascinating the way that the committee over the years, no matter who has been on the committee or not on the committee, has made some of these decisions. And obviously every year it triggers this conversation, should they move to 8? Then the debate will be, well, who's 9th? It's never going to end. But sometimes what they take into account and what they selectively choose not to is fascinating.
I think one of the things to think about too is, obviously Clemson, when they lost to Notre Dame, they played without Trevor Lawrence. So when you talk about the committee considering one player that wasn't part of a game and whether or not that has an impact on making the playoff or not, that might be part of it. And say, Clemson loses again, maybe in overtime, maybe a one score, maybe a 3-point game, they might say, you know what, Clemson's still a better football team than someone like Texas A&M, so we'll put a 2-loss Clemson in because their 2 losses were to Notre Dame, instead of putting in Texas A&M, who maybe they think won't compete at all for a championship. So they might even decide to keep Clemson in and say, you know what, they had 2 good games against Notre Dame, they lost them both close, so let's put them in instead of the Aggies.
Well, what's interesting about that, Justin, though, is that Texas A&M, their loss is to Alabama.
Right.
Now, granted, it was by 28 points. They weren't
Right.
very competitive in that game, but that's their only loss. They have some good wins. They beat Florida. It's not like the resume is all that different. I mean, who's got the best looking loss?
Yeah.
Sometimes is what it comes down to, and it helps when you haven't lost to anybody, so you can scratch that off. It also helps if you're a conference champion.
Yeah,
so
unless you're Cincinnati.
Yeah, of the conferences that quote unquote matter.
Right,
to the
Power
community,
5, yeah.
then your chances are pretty good in that regard. So yeah, I think it's Christine. I think it's probably win and get in, but I think you feel a lot better about it if you're Ohio State, if you flex your muscle a little bit. You get your full offensive line back. You run the ball well. You make a defense that's number 1 in the conference in scoring. You make them look bad at times. I think that's how you state your case. And even Sean Wade this week said we need to blow them out.
Yeah.
And nobody told him he had to say that. I think they all, as players, especially guys who've been around a little while, I think they understand how this process works. And you got a fired up Northwestern team. Again, they don't have anybody out. They're full speed. They're ready.
They might still have
you'll
that.
Get their best shot.
They might still have that memory too of losing to Ohio State 45-24 just a couple of years ago in the Big Ten championship too.
Yeah, and you know what? Last year was an awful game in Evanston with a team that was 3-9 last year. Northwestern was not very good, going through a transition at quarterback. Peyton Ramsey comes in this year, the Indiana transfer, who's done a phenomenal job for them. Just by being consistent. They don't do anything spectacular. Justin alluded to it a moment ago. The way that they throw the ball is not overly impressive. The one thing they do well in the throw game is throw to the tight end very well, especially around the goal line. They love to run that. They also will play action you a little bit and catch your linebackers cheating up a little bit. So they can hurt you throwing the ball, but they want to run it because they want to shorten the game. They want to maintain possession, and they want to make it a long day for your defense. The curiosity, I think, would be with Ohio State's lack of defensive depth, especially at the ends, with both Tyler Friday and Jean-Baptiste out. How will that materialize in the third and fourth quarter, when attrition starts to set in? How will they handle it? Will they still be able to rotate with Ohio State at defensive end? Will they find other guys to throw in there? They've got depth there, but something to keep an eye on.
Going back to time of possession too, they're pretty good at doing that because they're pretty good at forcing turnovers. They've got 12 interceptions this year, which is second only to Indiana in the Big Ten. So we saw Justin Fields throw a few against Indiana. That's because Indiana is a pretty blitz-heavy team, and he just made a few, mistakes that he'll probably not make again. But Northwestern doesn't really blitz all that often, so I wouldn't really necessarily worry about that. But turnover margin is something that they are good at. They're top 30 in the country in turnover margin. So if there's a way for Northwestern to beat Ohio State, it's just hold on to the football and run as much as possible.
Let's take a look at some of our Facebook comments here right now. Good morning to James and Stephen. Whitney Harding is watching. You guys probably know this, but one of Whitney's schools is Northwestern, so it'll be nice to see if Whitney's wearing purple or red today. Where does her loyalty lie?
Whitney, if I'm not mistaken, Whitney has 5 alma maters.
Well, because she's so smart, and then one of them being Northwestern, I'm like, right. Okay, Whitney, we get it. You're smarter than us.
Like, I have 1 college degree, and I am embarrassed.
Same, mine's down the street, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, like, I can't hang academically in my own office.
I can't believe the OU guy didn't chime in yet. They are more proud than anybody I know. Where's Barnes? Hello. Sorry, Justin.
I'll keep the 1.
Yeah. I don't know.
Paying it back is fine.
I don't have it in me to go to another one. All right, so good morning to James and Stephen and Whitney, Scott, Maurice, JJ, and Liz. Thank you guys so much for watching on our Facebook page. That's just on the NBC4 page, Jerry. You got a lot of commenters over on your page as well. Lots of Go Bucks. But if you guys do have any questions or comments about today's game against Northwestern, leave them in the comments below on all 3 of these pages or all 4 of our pages, and we'll be sure to see if we can get those answered for you guys. I want to go back to Cincinnati because I know a lot of people are super interested in that. They got a lot of ties to Cincinnati. I have not been following, but has Luke Fickell or any of the other coaches or players had anything to say about the committee and them really not ranking them where a lot of people think they should be because they're not in the Power 5 conferences?
Yeah, I listened to Luke's news conference this week, and Luke is famously aloof is not the right word because I think aloof has a pretty negative connotation.
Yeah.
Luke remarkably blocks out noise, and he does not watch television. His son actually signed this week with Cincinnati.
Nice.
And in his own household, he doesn't allow them to talk about the rankings and all the business with him because he doesn't want anything to impair his focus on building a winning program there, not only with recruiting, but on the field. Clearly, they've done that at Cincinnati. They recruit so well now. They're getting great players there. So the answer to that is no. He has not done a lot of politicking in that regard because it's just not in his nature. What he has done, and it was in his news conference sprinkled throughout, is he did remind people we're pretty good, in terms of having an elite quarterback like Desmond Ridder, great dual threat guy, defense that's top 5, top 10 in the country in most statistical categories. Marcus Freeman, the old Buckeye linebacker, is their coordinator, and maybe a candidate to be a head coach somewhere. They're legit. Cincinnati's legit. The problem for them has been like most programs, COVID. And, they haven't played in a month. They lost a bunch of games. They had guys that were, affected, pretty significantly. And that is the thing that, you're fighting 2 opponents every week. You're fighting a virus and you're fighting, the opposition. And that's really what has taken Cincinnati, out of the top of mind conversation because they haven't played.
Do you think that that's the case, that it's COVID because they haven't played all of their games? Or if they had played all of their games, we're obviously speaking hypothetically here, is their ceiling just, a New Year's Six game that they're not going to make the playoff no matter what? You could be a group of 5 team and have a great season, a perfect season at that, and still not make the playoff because that's just where your place in line is.
I think you're right. You think of Central Florida a couple of years ago, they were undefeated and they declared themselves the national champions, which is, by the way, the most power move ever.
Undisputed.
Undisputed for the Power 5 school. But I mean, like I guess with Cincinnati, it would have been better if they had been able to stay healthy and continue to play and continue to make their case every week. putting up impressive performances and doing the thing that they can do on the field. But it didn't help them not being able to play.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean they would have been in the playoff, doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means that it would have been a more impressive resume had they been able to do that. But, I think back, we're on the topic of Ohio State today. This is their 6th game. They've played this many games. That is not that many. That resume is tiny, especially in comparison to the teams that have played 8, 9, 10 games, even those schools that have dealt with COVID issues at big, places like SEC, ACC conferences that have been playing for a while. They've got teams that'll play 11, 12 games. And it's an apples to oranges comparison, which forces the committee to once again go back to their eyeball test instead of the metrics they love to get into to, break some ties. Ultimately, they're just going to say, well, I think that team's better.
Speaking of things that coaches said, one thing that we heard from a former UC coach, Brian Kelly, was, we may not even go to the playoff because if we can't have our friends and family there, then what's the point of playing in the game? I think he's probably,
I want to know you guys' initial reaction to that.
Just trying to get the committee to make a decision on that in his favor, but I don't think he's actually being serious.
I want to know you guys' initial reaction to that, because I know mine when I read it. Or maybe you don't want to share. I'll share. I thought it was insane. It definitely grabbed headlines, though, Justin, kind of like what you were saying.
I think he's just trying to use his platform on his soapbox there and try to influence that decision. But I mean, Notre Dame hasn't been to the playoff for a few years, so they're going to do everything possible to get to that game.
I mean, how bold though to try to strong
you're missing a lot of money.
The Rose Bowl. I don't know. I can't.
You're missing a lot of money if you're Notre Dame by not playing in that.
I audibly laughed when
the
I read
powers
the
that be won't
headline.
let that
I thought
happen.
it was dumb.
Thoughts, Jared?
In case anybody cares.
I think there's some real concern today. By the way, there was a little bit of a jawing match here before the game at midfield, Buckeyes and the Wildcats, which is kind of fun to see. To the point of the Rose Bowl, I'll tell you, I'm going to be very surprised if the Rose Bowl remains in Pasadena. Very surprised. I think, the Pasadena situation. They're playing a game there today. UCLA's playing a game there today without any fans. Clearly, the unique element of that is it's UCLA playing, I think it's Stanford in that game. And so the travel situation is far different than two teams from the East flying all the way across the country where their parents can't go to the game or can't eat. And they're not even allowed to attend a game in Southern California right now. I think that the prestige of the Rose Bowl is already gone. There's no parade this year. There's no fans this year. It's not the Rose Bowl as you know it. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have to be married to tradition when the tradition's already broken.
Yeah.
I think you can find a way to play the Rose Bowl with their title sponsorship and all that stuff, and you can paint some roses on a field in Indianapolis or in Georgia, and you can find a neutral site to play that game that makes more sense in terms of geographic location to the teams involved. We are in a pandemic. Anything you can do to limit travel, limit exposure. If parents want to go to the game, they can get in their car and drive to the game and manage their exposure level as much as possible. It's a common sense thing to me that can be solved, that obviously we're allowing the business, the dollars and cents of all this to get in the way of that.
You talk about tradition. I mean, look at the Masters. That was played in November. So if the biggest tournament, maybe sports in the world, can be moved, this obviously can too.
Yeah. It was still watched in my house.
Yes.
It was fine. Let me see. Let's go back to these Facebook comments. Also, I wanted to talk about, we got Berdina saying go Cats. Are you with Whitney? Are you another alum? Let's see. What else do we have here? I wanted to ask Jared and you guys about, are there any other games canceled today due to COVID? I'm looking at the schedule here, and it looks like all of the championship games are going to go on. We've got Big 10 and Big 12 at noon.
Coastal
ACC.
Carolina got canceled earlier this week.
Carolina. What was who were they scheduled to play?
Good question. Lafayette. Louisiana Lafayette. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was going to be an exciting one for teams, for fans of the Sun Belt, but not to be.
Well, looks like the Power 5 conference is definitely locked down.
Yeah.
Seems like for the first time we don't have a cancellation this week from one of them.
Hey, one other quick point that we want to make, and it's just kind of a late developing thing here. I'm just getting word here that if you're talking about depth today, right, on the defensive side, Ronnie Hickman is not going to play. And that was not on the unavailable report for Ohio State. He did not go through warmups. And I think that is a significant development, because what that means now, Justin, Josh Proctor moves back to the single high safety position that has a lot of pressure on him to get the defense aligned in the back end. So he's going to move there, which means you're probably going to have Justin Hilliard at the outside linebacker position where Baron Browning would be, and then depth at safety. Let me think about that for a second.
Marcus Williamson.
Well,
you see him back there.
If he could go back and play there, maybe.
Yeah.
I think Lathan Ransom, the freshman, maybe, because Court Williams is out.
Yeah.
Chad Huffman actually commented that he said he's more worried about Browning and Chrisman being out than Olave.
The punter, maybe not at linebacker. I don't have any big concerns about linebacker. I think, Baron Browning's a phenomenal player, an experienced player, but because they have a Justin Hilliard ready to plug in and go, who's played a lot of football, they're deep at linebacker. There's some guys that we haven't seen a lot of that we know are good, that we've seen them play. And so linebacker doesn't concern me. Punter, if it's a close game, second half would be a concern. So, Zach Hoover gets the call, it looks like, and we'll see how he responds to it. But, I don't know that I'm overwhelmingly concerned about that. But I think, this is a game where you just can't get guys hurt.
Yeah.
And look, it's football. It's going to happen. I mean, it's a part of the sport. So something to keep an eye on. But it's going to be fascinating viewing like it was 2 weeks ago.
Definitely. And Chrisman is so good. I'm just remembering his punts from the last game, too. Like, how many did he have right inside the 10?
He was Special Teams Player of the Week there for the Big Ten against Michigan State.
It was incredible. Not very often that a punter sticks out in my mind as having an amazing game, but that one he definitely did.
Winning field position's big against Northwestern. That's what they like to do.
All right. Jared, I think your video is freezing up on us, so it might be time for us to head out and watch this game. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Follow our live blog on NBC4i.com. Live updates from the game on Twitter as well. We'll see if the web team pulls out the kitty cat gifts today. That's my recommendation. Brian, if you can hear me. Jared. I like
it. Gets better every week. I mean
it
these
does.
Guys, they work so hard to find the most obscure things, and I actually appreciate that.
Every time I think of Northwestern, I don't know if you two gentlemen will know this movie, but it came out when I was in middle school, and their mascot, right? Somebody say it.
Wildcats.
Get your head in the game.
That is a reference.
So I'm gonna use
no.
Sorry, Jared.
Although I happen to really like Zac Efron's more theatrical work.
I will watch anything with him in it.
Very talented young man. He was phenomenal in The Other Baywatch.
Yeah.
The Other.
That one.
Really stretched his acting chops.
I'll watch it. It's fine.
Oh, did I say acting? I meant abs.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was talking about, too. Anyway, we'll head out. Follow NBC4i.com as well as our social media pages for live tweets from the game. And then we'll see you guys roughly around 3:30 for a post-game wrap-up. And we will carry the coaches and players' press conferences in full. And maybe we'll talk more about Zac Efron's abs. I am always down for that conversation. Tell you what. Bye, guys.
See